G'day, folks. Let's talk about space.
Boosters in ignition and liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
So I'm a huge space nerd. I love astrophysics and everything we've accomplished in space. I love the science fiction of it. I love the reality of what we have done in space over the past 100 years. It is amazing. Well, less than 100, but all the more impressive. And that's what I'm getting into today. The Apollo era, the Artemis era of space travel, and everything in between. Well, the highlights, my favorite bits, what I find most relevant. I'm not a scientist. I have a doctorate in nothing. I am an enthusiast. I find it interesting, and I like it, and I read about it. But I am by no means qualified to preach the science, the complexity, and the facts of this. I'm just saying what is public knowledge and irrefuted by anyone who's not a lunatic conspiracy theorist. So, let's get into it. This story begins in 1957. This story begins in ye old 1957, when the Soviets launched the first artificial moon into space, also known as a satellite, specifically the Sputnik satellite. 1 year later, NASA's doors opened because the Soviets sending something into space scared the absolute pants off of America, who were at a Cold War with the Soviets at the time. And so this completely supercharged funding, paired with a 1961 speech to Congress by JFK, all about anti-communists and how the Soviets cannot have intercontinental missile capabilities because they were at a Cold War at the time. So that really boosted funding for NASA and their lunar aspirations, their goals to put people on the moon. This birthed the Apollo era of space travel. Now, Russia did, the Soviets beat America to a lot of goalposts until they moved it to the moon. So I said they got the first satellite into space. They sent the first living thing into space, which was a dog, which did not make it back. And they sent the first person into space, which did make it back. And then, and so America trying to catch up. They sent 3 missions into space. The Mercury mission was, I think, just 1 person and a ship into orbit, back down safely. Good. Next one, 2 people safely. That was the Gemini, I'm pretty sure. And then finally, the Apollo mission with 3 people to the moon in 1969. The US landed 3 people on the moon. They planted a flag and a plaque. The plaque is not faded. The plaque reads, "We come in peace for all mankind." And that is why we say we landed on the moon. Neil didn't land on the moon. Buzz didn't land on the moon. JFK didn't land on the moon. NASA didn't land on the moon. The US didn't land on the moon. We landed on the moon in peace for all mankind. It was the greatest international achievement. I have gripes with the fact that this kind of space travel is motivated by geopolitical flexing, but I'm going to get to that. And so between 1969 and 1972, there were a few lunar missions, and then they stopped. No one has been to the moon since 1972. And yeah, up until, China says they're going to the moon. And so because of geopolitical flexing, NASA's announced plans to go back to the moon with the Artemis missions. Now, there's a few events leading up to this, throughout the 90s, the ISS Accords were drawn up. So the Soviets had a orbiter with a person in it in space, and since then we've added modules to it, and we've labeled it the International Space Station, which includes the ISS Accords, which eased geopolitical tension between Russia and the US, and also got a bunch of other countries to sign it. It's basically a space peace agreement, which is great, and it also eased geopolitical tensions on Earth between Russia and the US. And a bunch of countries signed on to these. The ISS is international property. It's the International Space Station. One problem with the ISS Accords, China was not invited to be a signatory. Now, I've read of reasons from human rights violations to geopolitical tension, but the point of these accords was to ease geopolitical tension. So why China's not signed onto the ISS or wasn't allowed to sign onto the ISS baffles me. It defeats the point. I feel like this has caused a lot more problems than it could have solved. But China's like, whatever. They start their own space agency. It's a very successful space agency. It's set out to do with great efficiency everything it's successfully accomplished everything it has set out to do with great efficiency. And in 2016, the Chinese Space Agency said they have plans to go to the moon. And the US decides to go back to the moon with the Artemis Accords. That was Donald Trump that announced that in 2016, shortly after China's announcement. Biden continued this, and the Artemis mission is going forward to this day. It's not really a bipartisan. It is bipartisan. It's not really a left or right issue. Whether or not we should go to the moon, it's geopolitical flexing, which I wish there were other reasons we funded space travel, but apparently not. Anyway, this birthed the Artemis era of space travel, which we are in now, and I'm going to get to the details of the Artemis missions later. Let's talk about what we have done in space since 1972, between the Apollo era and Artemis era. What have we done in space since the Apollo era? We have launched thousands of satellites into space since the Apollo era. Mostly telecommunication satellites, because we have the internet now. That's new from a 1972 point of view. And as well as 100 space telescopes, 30 of which are currently active. That includes the impressive JWST infrared telescope, the UV and visible light telescope that is the Hubble, and a few X-ray telescopes like the Chandra telescope, XXM Newton, and New Star telescopes. These are some of the most impressive. There are more, but space telescopes are cool. They see more than just visible light, and they are so impressive. They are technological marvels. Deep space probes, one of my favorite things to just know about, think about. I personally think it's one of the greatest accomplishments of humanity that we have sent out 4 probes beyond our solar system. We just sent them out into space, beyond Pluto, beyond the orbit of the sun. These are the Voyagers 1 and 2, and Pioneer 10, 11, and New Horizons. Did I say 4? It's 5. These all have hello plaques, which are golden plaques with etchings, engravings, our address, cosmic address in relative position to local pulsars, as well as pictures of humans and the solar system. And some of them have records with sounds, the sounds of Earth, our music, our nature, baby crying, people talking in different languages. That's so cool. It is really, really cool. And I know space is so big and there's so much in space. And we've explored a fair bit of that space and found nothing intelligent. But it's still cool that it's out there. It might be floating for... It could very well be floating out there for millions of years. And it's just really cool to think about. I mentioned the ISS. The International Space Station is an accomplishment we've achieved since 1972. A fun fact, not every single human being has been on the planet Earth for the last 27 years. Since the year 2000, there has always been someone in orbit around the Earth. That is cool. That's the International Space Station. And we have a robot planet. There's a robot planet in our solar system now. That is Mars, a planet entirely inhabited by robots. We did put those robots there, and they do cool shit. Now I'm going to mention the interesting ones, the ones that move around, rovers. We have satellites around Mars. We've shot a lot of stuff at Mars that just didn't move. They just sort of stay in the same spot and then observe everything from that spot. And we've actually crash landed a few things on Mars. We've sent a few things to Mars that just sort of crashed and didn't work, which I didn't know until I started looking up stuff for this video. I didn't know we crashed on Mars. That's pretty funny, actually. But here are the coolest rovers on Mars that have accomplished some badass shit. The Sojourner from 1997 was launched onto Mars, a rover that really just analyzed rock samples. In 2004, there was the Spirit rover, and that looked for evidence of water, which it succeeded in doing. Also in 2004 was the Opportunity rover. This one was set out to search for past water environments, so places that used to have water, and it succeeded. And in 2012 until right now, we sent out the Curiosity rover, which was set out to find ancient signs of, signs of ancient environments that might have been habitable. That's still active. That's still out there checking shit out. And one of my favorites, Perseverance in 2021, was set out to collect samples and find signs of ancient biological life, which it may have. I'll get to that. That's really good. And the Perseverance had a little buddy on it, which is called the Ingenuity helicopter. So the Perseverance rover was just your regular rover, big, 4 wheels, treks around. It's still active. It's actually taking samples, like little tubes, and then leaving them with trackers for another robot to come, pick up, and take back to Earth. But we have nothing yet. That's still in the planning process. Anyway, on the back of Perseverance was a little scout helicopter, an Ingenuity, called Ingenuity. This helicopter, I'm not certain it's still active. I think a dust storm may have done it in. But it lasted a lot longer than it was intended to last, and it did successfully fly on Mars. And yeah, for a few missions, this little helicopter went out, scouted ahead, and came back, and yeah, it was the little buddy of Perseverance. That was a pretty good one. In 2021 until now, the Chinese Space Agency has the Zhurong, I hope I'm saying that right, I might not be, the Zhurong rover, which is also set out to survey the ancient climate of Mars and rocks. They all look at rocks. There's a lot of rocks up there. They all pretty much crush up rocks and look at rocks. But no, that one's set out to look for ancient climate monitoring. Yeah, to monitor an ancient climate. Otherwise, look for signs of habitability in the past. So that's just our presence in space, from our Apollo era until the Artemis era. Our actual discoveries in space are just as impressive, if not more so, from 72 until now. We have, as I said, the Ingenuity helicopter flew on Mars in 2021, 117 years after the Wright brothers flew a plane on the Earth for the first time. We flew a helicopter on another planet. That is a crazy exponential in technological advancement. That's super impressive. Exoplanets were theorized long before the invention of the light bulb, but they weren't proven until 1992 with the Kepler Space Telescope. And since then, we have logged thousands of exoplanets with different space telescopes. they're all over the shop. Black holes. Early black hole theories date back to the 1700s. More mathematically sound theories date to the early 20th century. But in 2019, we took a picture of a black hole. It went viral. I was stunned. I thought it was cool. I was fascinated by it at the time. We took a picture of a black hole. That's crazy. That is really, really impressive. Now, panspermia is a whole can of worms. Panspermia is basically the idea that life didn't originate on this planet, but in fact, maybe microbes or bacteria landed on this planet off of an asteroid or something along those lines, and then started reproducing on this planet in its environment, and then we evolved from that. Now, that hasn't been proven, but really, really strong evidence for it has been building since 1972. So let's just start with organic compounds, the building blocks of life, but not life. Just what life is made of and what early Earth climate had when the life started evolving. We found organic compounds on Mars and asteroids. It's abundant throughout the universe. We did not know this in 1972. Organic compounds are abundant throughout the universe. The building blocks of life are everywhere. Also, bacteria like tardigrades and mold and viruses can survive in space. This is incredible. Bacteria survives the harsh environment of space. There are petri dishes on the outside of the International Space Station with living bacteria that evolves in its own unique way, opposed to bacteria on Earth. So space doesn't kill everything that's in it, especially tardigrades. Tardigrades are fascinating. Tardigrades might be aliens. Why else would such a sophisticated form of life be able to survive the harsh conditions of space if it's never been exposed evolutionarily to the harsh conditions of space? So we don't have proof that any of these things didn't originate on Earth, but we don't have really hard proof that it did. So the fact that it can survive space or go dormant, it goes dormant in space and then awakens when it's in a habitable environment. That's intriguing to say the least when it comes to panspermia. Dimethyl sulfide has been found on an exoplanet. We don't know how dimethyl sulfide would originate in nature if not through marine microbes, which is how it occurs on Earth. We have dimethyl sulfide in small amounts on Earth, and it only occurs through a chemical process of marine microbes. So how they ended up on an exoplanet, an exoplanet that's pretty. I think we're fairly certain there's an ocean on this exoplanet. That's intriguing too. There's no proof there's life on that planet, but if dimethyl sulfide doesn't originate from marine microbes, we have no idea where else it will come from or how it will get there. The same thing for the leopard spots on Mars, my favorite bit of news from 2025. This was fascinating. Perseverance took a picture of a rock. It takes a lot of pictures of rocks. But this rock had leopard spots on it, or what we're calling leopard spots because of just how it looks, not literally spots from a leopard. But no, these interesting ring-shaped spots, which we can determine what elements these spots are made out of. And well, they're not alive, they're not living, they're not... The only way that minerals can form like this is through chemosynthesis. That's the word. Big word. Chemosynthesis, which sounds a lot like photosynthesis, which photosynthesis is where plants utilize sunlight and the chemical process between utilizing sunlight to make energy. Chemosynthesis is the process of utilizing specific chemicals to create energy, which is what some microbial life on Earth does. And so these spots seem like fossils of that process. The NASA said that if it's not it's either signs of ancient microbial life or signs of a process that we are unaware of. That's the scientific way of saying more research required. But also in layman's terms, if it's not ancient signs of life, we have no idea how this happened or occurred. But it could have very well happened from chemosynthesis of old bacterial life on Mars, which is cool. Anyway, panspermia is not proven, but signs of life outside of this planet have been, the case for it has been building evidence so much since 1972. And so it's a very, very, very interesting theory that I am, who doesn't want to know where life came from? And that's just the dot points of what I found interesting as far as discoveries between 72 and now go. There have been so many more. There's heaps. But those are the ones that interest me. Those are my highlights, my favorites. So those are the ones I'm going through. What's happened on Earth since the Apollo era of space travel? Well, we punched a hole in the ozone layer. We fixed the hole in the ozone layer. We have trashed the environment in so many ways, from so many angles. We have, I'm just not going to bother bleeping myself when it comes to words describing violation. But we have done awful, awful things to this planet and its environments and its biodiversity and the atmosphere and the ocean and the dirt and everything we need for a habitable planet, we have degraded. And so while we have explored and monitored and discovered the potential habitability of other planets, we have absolutely trashed this one, which is tragic, and it is a far greater priority than space travel. Although I do want to see us invest a great deal into space travel. Let's not forget that is the priority. We can't live anywhere aside from this pale blue dot. And that's something NASA has achieved. Where so many of the satellites orbiting the Earth monitor our climate, our weather, our pollution. And thank goodness for that. Speaking of ecocidal maniacs, the privatization of space travel. This is a new occurrence, and in my opinion, it's a double-edged sword. It's good for motivating the public into funding space travel, if it has a marketing budget to incentivize people to want us to get things up into space and fund that kind of exploration is great. The government doesn't fund NASA. No government on Earth funds space travel unless people advocate for it. And private companies doing this, marketing this kind of thing, gets people on board. As I said, double-edged sword. I have a lot of problems with this too. It's bad for safety culture, straight off the bat. NASA does everything so cautiously, and they do 100 tests before they do anything even slightly risky, because that's terrible PR, and it destroys their bottom line and their funding if they do anything disastrous. Companies are just there to chase profits and satisfy stockholders, and they will rush what they want to rush, and they rush a lot. And lucky that no spaceships by private space agencies have blown up, although they've blown up a lot. None of the ones with people on them have blown up. And then there's the political conflicts of interest. When someone who, say, owns a private space company has enough money and power to get themselves in a position of government, and then either sabotages the public funding of the government space agency, or at least leverages that funding for contracts for their own space agency. This seems like a very specific scenario that no one really could have predicted with the privatization of space travel, but it's one that played out. And then there's space tourism, which I cannot think of anything that has launched into space and yielded such little scientific information than space tourism. Sending people up just into the bare definition of space and then bringing them down in an 11-minute endeavor because the people are rich and they want to. And yes, I'm pretty impressed by the fact that William Shatner has literally gone to space. He came back with a eye-watering message of environmentalism, and I applaud that. I think he's an excellent human being. Yeah. Now let's get into the meat and bones of this. Artemis era. The Artemis missions. What are the Artemis missions? Well, the Artemis missions, when I wrote this script, had 3 phases to it. It has 4 phases to it now. Phase 1 has already been done. To send an unmanned rocket up around the moon, back, see if the rocket works. It does. Very soon, I have no idea when I'm going to release this, but next month, this month, whatever. Very, very soon, probably after I release, I might release this after it happens. We are sending people up into a rocket, around the moon and come back. They're not landing on the moon, but they are going beyond the moon and back, just to test the life support systems for this mission. The third phase of the Artemis mission, scheduled for 2028 or 7, doesn't matter, was going to send people onto the moon for 10 days and then back, or a week, I'm not sure. That's no longer the case. The third phase of this is to test the docking procedure between the lunar lander and the rocket that's getting them up there and back, which, as I said, NASA does everything safety first. You can't say that a CEO in charge of this, if it was private, would have been like, yeah, no, let's spend a heap of extra money and piss off everyone that's interested in this endeavor, all the shareholders, and do this a safe way. I think a private space industry would have risked it, would have done a stupid thing about this. And look, I was like, oh, so you're delaying when people go to the moon next, but that was my impulsive side. It's like, let's go space, get your ass up into space. But my rational mind is like, yeah, safety first. That's how NASA does it. Safety culture is a necessity with space travel. And so, yeah, phase 3 is testing the docking procedure between the lander and the rocket. Phase 4 is set to send people up into space. I'm pretty certain that's 2028. And get them on the moon for, I think, a week to study how people live and what happens to your body when you spend that much time in that kind of space. We know what happens to people in the ISS, but the ISS is very close to the Earth. There's still a great deal of radiation shielding from the magnetosphere. The moon is a bit further beyond that. You're a little more exposed to radiation. And of course, the other conditions of space. We're going to monitor what happens to these astronauts, their health and everything. And obviously the astronauts are going to monitor the moon. They're going to drive around a bit. They're going to live on the moon, going to take more rock samples and everything. And I'm super excited for that. Now they're going to land on the south pole of the moon to look for ice. They want to know if there's ice on the moon. If there is ice on the moon, then there's water on the moon. And if there's water on the moon, we can potentially use that for rocket fuel, hydrogen fuel, which is useful in space. Every body in space that you land on, you want to have water, because it can be hydrolyzed into, I think that's the word, hydrolysis. It can be made into jet fuel, which is something you need in space. And it's not actually drinkable. We rely on the impurity of Earth's water and the minerals in it. You can't actually drink pure space water. It's not very good for you. It's pure H2O. You need the impurities of Earth's water for hydration, the minerals that are in it. But I'm sure we could sort of create drinkable water in space, but it wouldn't just be pure space water. No, the usefulness of water in space is for fuel. And the long-term goals of this is to have a moon base, have people that live on the moon, obviously in shifts like the ISS. When I said people have been on the ISS since the year 2000, it's been people in 6-month rotations, shifts. No one's literally been up there. I think the record is like a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. I'm pretty certain they take 6-month shifts, and if, return missions, if any screws are loose on the rocket, they postpone it, and maybe they have to stay up there for another 6 months. But the Artemis missions is to get a moon base, get people on the moon, and get people living in shift rotations on the moon constantly. This is clearly a baby step to Mars. If you can do this on the moon, you can do it on Mars, sort of. I mean, the travel time varies a great deal because Mars is a lot further away, and it's even further away for half of the year, or whatever. So yeah, that complicates things. But anyway, this introduces the Artemis Accords. So, like the ISS, the Artemis missions, the moon is also going to have its own rules and laws, and this requires countries signing onto the Artemis Accords, like the ISS. It includes space peace, so no weapon, no wars to be fought in space. No sovereign ownership of anything in space or beyond the Earth. And the agreement to preserve and not mess with Apollo-era archaeological sites. So, for example, the moon landing, the plaque. You're not allowed to go there and kick stuff up. It's a preserved archaeological site that's not to be messed with. So that's kind of cool. It's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. Also, just basic, cooperation, cooperative efforts in space, and also the registering of whatever you send up into space. Register everything you send up into space, so all the agreed upon nations and space institutions know everything is up there. Nothing's going to crash into each other. You're not sending any weapons up there, and it's all, kosher. Russia and China are not signed on to the Artemis Accords. Obviously, China's beef. I mentioned why China has beef with NASA and these kinds of accords. They're being excluded from the ISS Accords. But also, Russia is not signed on to the Artemis Accords because it's too American-centric, which, Russia, geopolitical tensions with Russia did greatly simmer down between the ISS Accords in 2020, and then Ukraine war. Russia's back to being an isolated bully, so that's unfortunate. So, super long term here. The ultimate goal of space travel, up until we do find aliens or even bacterial life that didn't originate on Earth, the ultimate goal here isn't to get to Mars or to land on the Jovial system, the Saturn system, or the Neptune system, one of their moons that may or may not be slightly habitable or adaptable, which is a phenomenal end goal. But no, the ultimate goal here is Terran unification. It's space peace. It's to accomplish space peace and then bring that code, that ethics, onto the Earth and have Terran unification, Earth peace. The Artemis missions are sending the first woman to the moon, the first black man to the moon, and that's great, all for diversity, but technically there is no diversity in space. We're all Terran. We're all just people. And so it should be about space peace. I'm disappointed that Russia and China are not in on the Artemis Accords. I do think they're doing terrible things in regards to human rights violations and border violations and international law. They're crapping all over it. But space peace should be easy to achieve. And then from space peace, you can build Earth peace. And so that's the greater goal of space travel. That was the goal of Star Trek. That we can't accomplish extreme achievements like space-bearing abilities without peace on Earth, without what I call Terran unification. We're all Terran. We're not a part of. We shouldn't be divided by religion or borders or race. We're all just Terran. There is no race. There are no borders. We are on a pale blue dot. We are just Terran. We are humans. And if we work together and kept funding consistent and space exploration consistent in the name of science and progress, we can accomplish great things. 2001 Space Odyssey, up until moon landing sort of ceased, died off, cut off hard, and people realized, hey, we're just not going to the moon anymore. 2001 Space Odyssey was not far-fetched. It was considered pretty damn conservative for the expectations of the future at the time. But then 2001 came, and no one had as much as gone to the moon again. I'm excited for Artemis. I hope we continue a staunch, continuous presence in space from Artemis onwards. I think private space industry might actually assist with that. Hopefully it's done safely and ethically. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I have references that you should check out, and they're not boring citations. These are actual scientist communicators that are far more qualified than me to talk about this stuff. I'm just going to start off with Star Talk, Neil deGrasse Tyson's current platform. It's amazing. It's a really great show. If you're interested in this kind of thing, you should watch it. If you're not interested in this kind of thing, he will probably get you interested in this kind of thing. The NASA has an app. I consider it a healthy form of scrolling. It's not an endless feed of crap. It's a finite feed with no ads, and it does tell you about real accomplishments in space. I like their 3D model of the solar system. You can sort of scroll through, or not scroll through, but you can like drag through, and you can tap on all the satellites and the planets, and it tells you what we know about them. And that's really cool. Check out the NASA app. Replace your doom scrolling with the NASA app, and you'll learn something. I love that they have that. A great shorts platform, Astro Alexandra. A woman does these great, really engaging shorts just about space news and stuff. I like her content. It's very good. I'll link that. And the Planetary Society, if you want to get involved and just throw money about. I wouldn't recommend throwing money about to anyone. But the Planetary Society does great work in advocating for space exploration, space travel, and science. The Planetary Society is, they're a lobbying group, but they lobby for space exploration. And I do not say good things about lobbying groups. But the Planetary Society has a noble goal and noble accomplishments, and I applaud their work. And if you want to watch a good TV show, don't ask me where it streams. The Cosmos TV show is fascinating. It is awesome. It's not like Star Trek. It is real. It is actual real space and space accomplishments, but also there's a broad spectrum of scientific communication. I'd highly recommend the Cosmos series. There's the original 1980s series with Carl Sagan. That was really good. Still very watchable. Neil deGrasse Tyson did 2 seasons around 2015. Not exactly, but around that, somewhere around there. Maybe 2014 or 6, I don't know. But he did a really good update on it. There's newer science in it, obviously better graphics and high budget CGI and animation. But no, that's very good, clear science communication as well. I'd recommend checking out the Cosmos series. And I'll try to link something to all of these below. Thank you for watching all the way through. I still don't have a sign off. Live long and prosper.